Hi, I'm beginner driver. I have introduced tips for reverse bay parking in one try, including entry position, proper steering magnitude, and correction during reversing in my last video. Click here to watch if you haven't watched yet. In this video, I will go into the detail in correction during reversing. Correction during reversing, slightly oversteer. If you park into the parking slot on your left side, and you end up parking to left, that's mean you oversteer to left during reversing. To correct oversteer, you need to steer less. For example, you can see the gap in red circle is getting shorter and will be less than the gap in the blue one. So I steer left less to one rotation to make the park in a more center position. If the gap in red circle is less than the blue one, you can increase the gap in red circle by straightening your steering wheel. When your car is still a little oblique, this can increase the gap in red circle. And steer to left again to make the car parallel to the parking slot. When you correct in this way, make sure you still see the gap between cars in the mirror when straightening the steering wheel, especially if you don't have reverse camera. It prevents you hit the car nearby when you reverse too much. To correct oversteering, basically you don't need to steer right before the car is parallel to the parking slot. Correction during reversing, slightly understeer. If you park into the parking slot on your left side, and you end up parking too right, that's mean you understeer to left during reversing. To correct understeer, you need to steer more. The car will enter the parking slot far from the corner. So I steer from one rotation to left maximum to enter the parking slot. If I already steer left maximum, and if there is space available, I intentionally let the car facing a little bit right. Then straighten the steering wheel. Let the car move straight for a while, until the gap in red circle more than the blue one. Then I steer right to straighten the car. When the car is parallel to the parking slot, straighten the steering wheel, and let the car reverse slowly. When you correct in this way, make sure you won't hit the car nearby. Pay extra attention to the right front of the car, which beginner usually omit. Also make sure you still see the gap between cars and the mirrors when straighten the steering wheel. It prevents you hit the car nearby when you reverse too much. If you oversteer or understeer too much, you can't finish your parking in one try. Drive forward to readjust your position. I have introduced method to deal with these situations. Click here to watch if you haven't watched yet. Also, if you find it very difficult to park in one try, don't force yourself to finish it in one try. It is very common for beginner to finish parking in multiple try. Points to aware. Reverse in very slow speed. Even you make wrong judgment. If you move slow enough, you can still able to correct it. Starting position. When you start the park, if there is space available, try not to start very close to the parking slot. If you start with a little bit more distance, this will increase the distance when you are reversing, and you have more room to correct. Here is some real-life footage with car nearby. In real-life situation, you may not easily see the parking line as I demonstrated, but you can see the car nearby in the mirror very easily. Many driver found it is more easy to park with car nearby because can have the sense of distance from the cars when they look the mirrors. Your point of attention can shift from the parking line to the car nearby because it is more important to maintain proper distance between car. And for beginner, it is not necessary to park in perfect center. Just leave adequate space for both sides to open the door is already good enough. This is a slightly oversteer case. If you use mirror as attention points, I want the gap in red circle is more than the blue one a little bit until the very last moment to even both sides. Now it is clear that the gap in red circle is shorter than the blue one. I straighten the steering wheel. Make sure there are gaps you can see in the mirror. Wait until the gap in red circle more than blue one. Then you steer left to make the car parallel to the parking slot. This is the case of slightly understeer. I keep steer left until my car is a little oblique and facing right. Make sure there are gaps you can see in the mirror. I straighten the steering wheel. If you use reverse camera as points of attention, Wait until the gap in red circle more than blue one. My reverse camera is a little bit off-center. You see the gap in blue circle should be the arrow I showed. Then you steer right to make the car parallel to the parking slot. I put a lot of effort to make this video. Your support is my motivation to make this video. If you find this technique useful, hit the subscribe button, comment, like and share. I'll be very grateful for all your support.